Hello there everybody, Brandon here coming to you today in my gallery, and so I had a little bit of a request here through the YouTube channel to show you my process of painting rocks. So you can see some of my paintings here. I've got some rocks here in this river scene, got some other rocks here under the water in this scene. So I'll show you a little bit here quickly on my process for doing that. Let's go. Okay, so I'm just going to show you my process here on making a couple of different types of rocks that I do. Now, the first one I'm going to show you just a simple, quick, easy way to throw some rocks out there. This is going to be the old school kind of Bob Ross way of doing it. So here I've just got a flat wash brush. You could do this with a rounded type brush, a filbert type brush, something that's going to bend on you enough that you can turn that brush to the side and get a brush stroke out of it, because we're going to go through one color of paint on one side of the brush, another color on the other side, and then we're going to move the brush to the side to make that brush stroke. So the quick Bob Ross kind of method of making a rock with a highlight on it is to just take you a dark color, so let's say something like raw umber with a touch of black in there to make our base color of this rock. So just something dark, and then also raw umber with a touch of titanium white on it here to make our highlight color, let's say. And now you basically just take that brush and pull one side through your dark color. So I've got my dark on one side of this brush, and then I turn and pull the other side one time through that light color. So I've got the light color on the other side of that brush like that. And then you just come in and drop a rock looking shape in there in one little brush stroke, where your highlight color is on the top and your dark shadowed color is towards the bottom. And you can drop in a whole pile of those very quickly and easily to make you some rocks. So see, we got a little cluster of rocks in there. Again, that's the quick, easy, old school kind of Bob Ross methodology. Now, you'll see me do different kinds of rocks. If I'm putting some rocks out here on the ground, I usually start with an entire dark blob for my rock shape, whatever it wants to be, and then I will come back and highlight over that. So that was just, again, dark color of basically raw umber and some black. Now if I come back into the titanium white in that mix, I can come here on the top of this rock and put in my highlights. Now I want to create brush strokes kind of in the direction of the grain of the rock, so to speak. So rounded that top off a little bit. And then maybe I'll skip a little space here to leave some dark, and then create another little shelf on that. And maybe do the same right over here on this edge. So that's been two color passes now. I can make some more distinction in there on this rock if I want. I can add a touch of blue maybe to my dark color and create a more vertical brush stroke to create like the downward grain of the rock here below that top, if I want to do that. We'll get in a little bit closer so you can see that. So I'm coming underneath here and creating a more vertical brush stroke that's basically given us that shelf of that rock in here. And I want to darken that down a little bit because I want it to be darker than my top highlight color there, obviously. And then you can also add highlights more on the top. So we've got one passive highlight up there. I can come in with a little bit more titanium white and maybe really brighten that top leading edge up a little bit. And your highlight passes really are just however you want to make them in terms of color, intensity, and brightness. So there's a little stack of a rock there maybe. If you wanted to make that, you know, maybe a moss colored thing, you could add you some green into your mix. And say we've got a little bit of green moss maybe growing on that rock out there. And then a touch of white highlight in on that as well. Or maybe in your world your rocks have got more yellow in them, so maybe you put some yellow ochre in your mix and you come in here and you add a little bit of yellow ochre. Or even red. Maybe they got a touch of red in their life, so you can even add some red coloration in this mix. They're your rocks in your world, so you can put whatever you need to communicate what you're trying to do there. Now let's say maybe you want to go for some of that more like vertically shaped kind of flaky type rock that you see a lot of times out west maybe. So I'll do the same order of go for me. I will put a dark base coat down first, so I'm going to just do, let's say, some raw umber, a little bit of black, touch of red into it as well, and then make a basic shape with more vertical brush strokes of whatever rock formation I'm trying to put in here. And then we will come over it with some highlights. So I'm going to create basically a kind of a rusty brown kind of color with some yellow ochre, a little bit of red, a little bit of raw umber in that as well. And then I will come over this and create a couple of places where I just streak down the face of that, and I'm not looking for full coverage over my darks, just in some places, most places I should say, not just some, but I don't want to completely cover up all that dark back there, so I'm leaving some stuff in there. Now maybe I add a tad bit more yellow ochre to that mix. And then come back in again with a second pass where again I'm just touching this color in on the face of this. Not covering up all the darks back there. And then you add maybe some titanium white for a final highlight pass, and this is where you have to kind of make some decisions of where my brightest highlight's going to be. Where is this light source coming from, the sun or whatever is out there. And so it's catching the tips of some of these rock faces. And some of that's blending in with my brown background I've got going on there, but you get the idea. And so you've created that kind of rock formation. Now let's come back over here with my little simplistic kind of Bob Ross specials here. Let's say you're just trying to do a whole group of rocks that are piled together. I will just basically take that dark background color and blot out an area. And then in that area, I will come in with a little bit more black now and create a couple of places where there's just a little more shadow than others. And this is just random. I'm just putting some darker areas in there that I will come back in and use those dark areas to define out some individual rocks. So you can put these dark areas in just randomly at this point, unless you have a specific rock cluster you're trying to create. And then I'm going to switch over to a little smaller brush to get this done now. So this is a little 1/8 inch kind of angled brush where I'm going to get my highlight color, which is basically just the same raw umber black brown mix here we've been working with, a little titanium white added in there, and to start to define out some individual rocks that are in here. Again, come over some of that dark that I put in to touch in some of this lighter highlight color. And I'm going to make more than one pass, so I don't want this to be my brightest color per se. I'm just lightening up what was already out there to start defining out a few shapes in there. Now I just add a little bit more titanium white to that to brighten things up a little more and start to really pick out where some individual rocks are. Lighten my mix up even more, and we can start to overlap some of these rocks now where they're hanging over top of another one, where you can see they're just kind of piled in here. You still have separation from one rock to the other as long as you have a different contrast of your lights and darks from one to the other. And I'm not really introducing much in the way of colors here, but here's a little bit of green thrown in there just to mix it up a little bit. You can see how we have fairly quickly there created essentially what is a rock pile. And just for purposes of completing the scene here, I'm just going to take a liner brush now into a little bit of sap green with some raw umber mixed into it. We're going to darken some green up here, get us a nice dark green value. Stick ourselves some grasses in here with this really dark green, probably almost looks black to you there. This is basically giving me a background of grass color, and I can come in with some highlight grass on top of it. So now I'll just come back into green that I'm not darkening up as much. You can even add a hint of yellow ochre in there with it to brighten it up a tad bit. Put a few of those in. And then my brightest green highlight for last. You just drop in a couple of those over the top of your darks. There's some grass growing in there. So now let's say we want to talk about some rocks down in this river here that we're going to create below it. When we're dealing with water, normally water's going to have some kind of color or stain to it. It's not going to be crystal clear, at least not in my neck of the woods. So I'm going to create a little bit of, and I'm going to thin this out a little bit. You can use mediums or you can use water if you're dealing with acrylics or whatever. I'm going to come in and create a kind of a brown-green mix here. Then I'm going to come in here and smear around and call this my undertone of my water, so to speak. And I don't necessarily have to have uniform color here. In fact, having variations of light and dark in this is actually going to be a good thing when it's all said and done. So don't worry about uniformity of lights and darks here. Give yourself a little variety. Now in my stream bottom composition there, for this purpose here, I'm going to bring in yellow ochre, let's say. And I'm going to just add that to my mix that I just smeared on there. And I'm going to create a couple of places here where I bring that yellow ochre in, basically looking for like the tops of some underwater rocks here. I'm not looking for the bases of them or the sides or anything. I'm just looking to define out where the tops are of some of this water, or some of these rocks that are under the water. Now I want to vary that coloration up a little bit. I'm going to darken it slightly again with my raw umber, and maybe add just a hint of red in there as well. And then come back in some of these empty spaces between all that and add in again kind of the tops of some rock. It's down in here. I don't want to lose all of that dark underneath because there's going to be shadows between some of these rocks that dark is going to have to communicate for us. And now this is just about going back and forth with a couple different color passes until you kind of get the look that you want. And so we're basically focused in that area right there that I've created. We're going to, now that it's dried up, I'm going to make a thin pass. So I'm going to thin out basically some white, titanium white with, I'm just going to use some water. Thin out some white to where it's really thin, almost an ink-like consistency. And all I'm looking to do here is to create a little bit of a glaze over the top of this to communicate our water. I'm going to test it out here off on the edge to see exactly what I've got. That's almost too thick, but it's okay for the top edge. I want to be able to see through it. Now that my brush is starting to lose paint a little bit, I can now bring that down over these rock formations through here. And so now that's giving us the impression that there's a little bit of water in there. Just to help visualize it a little bit better, I'm going to put in maybe the dark shoreline lip there to help you see what we've got going on. And then let's say we've got foreground bank right here. Now you can see our little piece of river running there between our rocks. So I hope you guys maybe got a little something out of that that will help you. A couple of different rock formations there that I showed you how I do, including some rock underneath the water there. Until next time, happy painting, everybody.